employee experience in my mind is one of the most untapped, underutilised strategic advantage in a business.
You can't do it all by yourself.
It's not even a secret sauce, it's just so simple.
It's common sense.
You're going to come up against people who underestimate you all the time.
Yeah. Coffee with a Female Founder is where we have honest conversations about everyday business with the women behind it. I'm Amy, your host and founder of Course Studio, a marketing and business consultancy, and The Female Founder, a community-driven learning platform. Each episode will chat over a coffee with a different female founder, diving into their challenges, wins, lessons learned, and the advice they wish they had when starting out. The coffee is delivered to us courtesy of vexcoffee.com, which is the UK's freshest coffee discovery club. Every month, they expertly handpick 2 small independent coffee roasters for you to explore. They've been kind enough to give our listeners 25% off your first box using the code FEMALEFOUNDER or using the link in the show notes. All right, well, welcome back to Coffee with a Female Founder, and I'm really looking forward to talk to today's guest, Hannah Swarbrick-Done. Done. I tried too hard and it came out really well.
Yeah, it's okay.
So Hannah is a part of the Female Founders WhatsApp group chat that we've got going at the moment, which is an uplifting and supportive space for women in business. And you have recently come out of employment and you've started up your own consultancy called HR Yellow.
Yellow HR, yeah.
Miss the Yellow. Tell me a little bit about life before HR. What did that look like?
Varied. I've only been in the HR space for probably about 8 years, which, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I think some people would be a bit like, oh, is she going trying to be a thought leader after 8 years? But I think the life beforehand, when I look back objectively, it's you can see the consistency is relationship building, and I've always had that connectivity and trying to help. I'm a massive empath, so trying to help people, look after people, support people. So I think if we went all the way back, out of uni, going into uni, I didn't really have any passion I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, not a lot of people do at that age.
What did you study?
I did new media design.
Nice.
And then something called Design Futures. But the new media design was basically a creative course in media. Yeah. I thought I wanted to be in marketing. And I found out very quickly I was not a creative. No, not a bit of me. But I found this course in Salford Uni, which was Design Futures, and it was all about learning the business behind marketing. So back then it was all we knew about was the front end of it, you know, the photography, the creation, the animation, the video, all that stuff. What I hadn't taken into consideration was the business development, the people behind the scenes that are driving the business and yeah. So I got into that, and as a project out of uni, we had to do this. We had to create something that we could put into the local career market that showcased the kind of students that were coming out of that course. Wow. And we created a newspaper. And then I was on the team that had to go in and sell that to local businesses to get them to pay for the production of it. So very quickly, it was up to me to go and convince people, build relationships, build people to buy into me and buy into, you know, what we were trying to do. So then I got a job in business development for marketing agencies off the back of that. Yeah. And again, all that was orientated around building relationships, maintaining relationships, and knowing that when they needed something, they'd come to us. I made connections with people like, at the time, it was like, I can't remember what his actual role was, but he was really high up in Warburton's. Another guy was really high up in Red Letter Days. So I was making connections with, you know, I had no business doing that really. I think I was, how old would I have been? I don't even know, 21, 22. So I did business development for a bit. And then I moved into Manchester, did business development there, again for a marketing agency. Loved it. I had such a good time, and we did events. We put events on in the area, and that's where I started to build my network. It was a really network orientated business, and I was really fortunate that my bosses at the time were really well connected, and you know, we ended up having such a great group of network, but then became friends. Most of which one of them is actually my client now.
Oh, nice.
So that was that bit. And then I went into business development for hospitality. So that was my first, outside of doing hospitality when I was a teenager, that was my first sort of professional role. So I combined the two, but it just wasn't the right fit. It was a bit of a square peg, round hole. I think Living Ventures was the company at the time that I worked for, and I worked for the Oast House in Manchester.
Yeah.
And although the role was quite a new role for the industry, Living Ventures were taking the industry by storm as well. It was the first time hospitality had really had like a professional outfit in Manchester. Living Ventures was fantastic. Most people I know now have worked on Living Ventures at some point. But that particular role for that particular venue just didn't really work. And I think I'd pushed and pushed to try and suggest why it wasn't working. And I wasn't getting anywhere. So I just got really frustrated and left and followed a boy to Thailand.
Wow. Okay.
So I didn't have a plan, to be honest. I've been, as you can probably guess, I like change. I like adventure. I've travelled a lot. I went to Australia for 4 months when I was 18 with a friend. I lived in Mallorca for 3 months and learnt to dive. I've travelled a lot. So that for me was like fantastic. What I get to just go and live in paradise and just have no return date and just do what I want. Hope for the best. Yeah, 26, I decided to go and do that. So, 24, I decided to do that. So 2 years, I lived in Koh Tao for a year and a half, for 6 months, and I was running the pub crawl there. So that's like the third biggest pub crawl in the world. So that alone, again, going back to trying to make it a bit relevant, was the fact that you're trying to build relationships with local businesses to make sure that everyone's happy with what we're doing. Yeah. Obviously, meeting people from all over the world and just putting on a good show, really. So that was a good time. Money ran out very quickly. Koh Tao is not cheap in comparison to the rest of Thailand. So I quite quickly had to figure out what I was going to do to actually earn a bit of money. And in this hostel that I went to in Koh Phangan, I met the tour company that I ended up working for. Ultimate Thailand, they were called. They were based out of Australia. So I ended up then being a tour guide with them for a year and a half it was. So we'd pick people up in Bangkok, take them on 10-day trips. And again, that was just about, there was various ages, all in one group. We'd never had more. I think our biggest group was about 25. But very much mother hen role. Either best friend, mother hen, sister, whatever they needed, you had to take on that role and just make them feel. A lot of young kids had never been travelling before, were really nervous, or at one point there was a bomb that went off in Bangkok, so everyone was absolutely beside themselves, scared. So there's all sorts of little things that taught me around people and really leaning into my empath side of things. And then I got to the point where I was bored of living out a suitcase, really, because you have 10 days on and then you have 4 days off and then you do it again and again and again. So it did wear a bit thin. I had this idea in my head that, God, I can't get to 30, go home and start again. I had in my head that would be a really bad thing. And I just had this vision of me going back to mum and dad's in New Mills and being like, now what? So I was like, right, how do I combine these two things? How do I make a career out of what I love, which is like adventure and looking after people? And I ended up deciding that I wanted to open a hostel in, I know, in Burma.
Talk about change.
I know. I get bored easily. I've also struggled with routine, so shock. So we had, I wanted to do it in Burma. It's Myanmar now. It's not called Burma anymore. And because I'd been to that many hostels, I was like, I know what will work. I know what people need to feel comfortable, to, really get the most out of a great travelling experience. So I was like, right, well, what I haven't done is been a manager in a hostel or done anything operational. So I thought, right, I'll go home, learn in England because I'll earn decent money. And I'll be in better outfits and businesses. So that's why I ended up in back home, worked in a local cafe thing for a bit. And then, by chance, which it absolutely is by chance, as in the guy I worked with in this little village ended up being the general manager at this big neighbourhood, which at the time was massive in Manchester. I had, again, no business being in there. So again, just through connection, who I knew, got me a job there. And I stayed there for 3.5 years, going through the operation and going through the ranks of management, really, and trying to understand how to do this. But very quickly, the dream of the hostel disappeared. Right. I think just life gets in the way, and I was just so sucked into Manchester, and I loved being back in Manchester. I really, really enjoyed it. And Manchester neighbourhood was in its heyday at the time, so it was it was really, really fun time. And I was like, I don't really. Again, I then felt like I'd be starting again if I left. So that's when I had the conversation with the MD of the business, and it was growing. The business was in growth, and I just said, I don't want to be a general manager, but I like this business. What opportunities have I got? And he just said, well, what is it that you like most about your job? And I said, working with the people, working with the team, really getting them to improve and, just working with them really. And he said, right, well, we don't have anybody in HR, training development, and off you go. So then I think in total, including the operational stint, I was with that business for 7.5 years. So I started the HR function on my own, with the support of a consultant. Yeah. So I'd already had a bit of an inkling of what a consultancy was. Yeah. And then, I think I got to that point with that business, like I'd said earlier on, it wasn't in growth. It was just ticking over, and I was bored ultimately. I'd got ready for change. I needed something new. I'd put myself through a CIPD. So CIPD is a professional qualification for HR. Yeah. So it was, God, that was hard work doing that whilst it was full time and going through COVID. Yeah, okay. So that was quite a lot. But once I did the CIPD, that really cemented my passion for HR and what it could do. It just gave me that deeper understanding of what it was about. Yeah. And I think once I'd done that, I just felt like I was really underutilised and just wanted to learn more, do more. Yeah. I'm really passionate about personal development and learning and constantly trying to strive and do new things and put myself in new situations. And so that's why I ended up going for this head of people role at my last job, because again I was leading a team, whereas I'd been on my own before, and the business had just got loads of investments. It was, I think the plan was 3 venues per year. Yeah. So high growth plans, but again the market just completely turned and changed that course of direction. But then again, as I've proven to myself, I just adapt and find a different route, and then that led me to go, right, sod it, I'm going to go on my own.
That's amazing.
Because I think I just felt like that. Even though I'd only been in 2 places, I felt like it was the same barrier every time, and I thought, well, why put myself in a position where there's going to be potentially the same barrier again? Yeah, just do it. Yeah, for yourself.
Yeah. You say you're not a creative person, but it does sound like you are.
Well, I think I associate it. We were talking before the podcast that my sister is like, and my mum, they draw, they paint, they think things up and whatever, whereas I was good at copying things. When I was at school, I did art at school. Again, which is why I think I ended up trying to think I was going to be in marketing and stuff, because, I don't know, I loved the idea of media. I loved the idea of, I like nice things, like visual things, but I just couldn't create them. Do you know what I mean? So I think I've also associated creativity with that, but you're probably right.
I think there is a lot of creativity and strategy and innovation and growth, and definitely. Yeah. Has there been any kind of negative experiences that have pushed you in the direction of starting up on your own or going into HR?
God, loads. I think in hospitality, when I started anyway, it was such a male-orientated business. It still is a lot of the time, but I think it's come It's come a long way since COVID. Yeah. But before then, there just really wasn't very many female operators, particularly not female managers. And to be in that kind of environment, and the guests, it's not the employees that are the issue, it's the guests. So you'd go into somewhere like Neighbourhood and they'd say, I want to speak to a manager. And I'd say, here, what can I do for you? And they go, no, the manager. I'm going, I am the manager. So having to get people to trust that you're in a position of authority and can support and help is mental, to have to constantly try and make people... And it's not like I ever had an issue making people feel comfortable. I think I had to learn a bit more authority. I was never really a very authoritative, is that the right word? Yeah. Person before then. So it really helped me grow character and like be confident is probably the right word. To a point where at the end they called me Mama Hood because, I came over to the table and be like, right, boys, you need to calm down. They go, okay. That's just a silly example. But I think through hospitality taught me that, and then going into HR, it is a typically female role because it's a nurturing role, and it's very stereotypical in that way. That's not throwing shade on loads of fantastic men that are in this space. I'm not doing that at all. It's just,
just how it is.
And I think in my experience, some of my bosses I've had have been. That's been very obvious that they can be quite dismissive, almost like it's a fluffy thing. And I think that's why HR, now it's moved into a more strategic position. The leaders who are of a certain generation are still struggling with the idea that women are in thought leadership, authoritative and not fluffy positions. You know, they're really adding commercial value. And I think that's the change that business leaders are struggling with now.
Yeah.
Not all, but still a majority. So I did work for a bully. And it was
Haven't we all
hard work. Yeah. It's just, I think what I really struggled with under his leadership was I could challenge him, but it was met with just verbal abuse. And it got to the point where he'd started to try and blame me for things that were going wrong in the business when it was absolutely him, but sort of deflecting it and saying, well, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of people, why is this happening? And I thought, again, no accountability, no understanding of how his behaviour is impacting things around him. And I was crying constantly. And it got to the point I was like, it's just not worth it. Like, what am I trying to prove here? It's like, it's not about me. This is clearly a him problem. So yeah, I just got to the point where I was like, I can't work for somebody who doesn't share remotely the same values and who doesn't understand or value that this is a really important position and we should be working together. Absolutely. I didn't have that realization until I left that business because I'd felt so, just squashed and it was not a nice experience that. But afterwards, I felt so empowered for making that change and obviously feeling validated by getting this head of people role after him saying I wasn't ready, I couldn't do data, I wasn't this, I wasn't that. So yeah, it felt really validating that I found this other role and the businesses and the business leaders really listened and understood and took in what I was saying. But then again, there's always someone who doesn't understand it. And my job now is to teach them, coach them and make them understand why it's an important role and why it's not about me. I still get a lot of ageist. What's the word? Like I'm not old enough to have the right experience. So someone said to me, I was promised a senior leadership team. And I said, well, it depends what you consider senior leadership. If it's age, then no, you're right, you haven't got a senior leadership team. But if it's experience, we've actually got more collective experience in this industry than you have because you've come from a different one. So it's just about what your lens is and what you take from that. And I think and again, because we are in a situation now in business where we've never had this many different generations in workplace at one time. So the millennials, the middle ones, are the ones that are dealing with both ends of it, and I think they're the ones that are in a position now where they've got to really influence both sides and be that kind of connection. So yeah, I think there's been a lot. And like I mentioned, this other guy that I went and he said, you're young and you're beautiful, who's going to take you seriously? And I think that's such how naive is that? And you're also limiting yourself by having those kinds of preconceptions. You're not going to be able to tap into what is all this experience and wealth and knowledge that's coming through into the workplace now if you just think your perspective is the only one worth looking at. It's just...
I think that's a massive misconception with different teams is that you have to all be the exact same and kind of, everyone does live by the same values because you have to in a company, especially on the leadership team. But this idea of cognitive diversity, that breeds innovation and breeds growth.
Massively.
So Yeah, you're right.
If you're a leader, like you were saying earlier on, what do you do when you're starting to bring people on board? You don't hire people that are the same as you. You don't have high-performing teams that are all a carbon copy of each other. That is a surefire way to fail your business. Absolutely carbon, what you do is find people who cover your weaknesses. And you, as a leader, you're never going to be someone who has all the answers. Why would you want to be? Imagine how stressful that would be all the time. And you've seen it. I've seen it where people think that they should be the one who has the only answer, and they're the only one that can sign anything off, and they're the only ones that can control any decision. And you think, well, first of all, the growth is stopped because they can't be everywhere at once.
Exactly.
Innovation stops because, again, everything has to come to them. Decision making, accountability, engagement, all that is really stifled if this one person is trying to control everything and not lean into the team around them and really trust that they've hired them for their expertise ultimately, isn't it? I think all those experiences is what kind of made me go, well, no, again, trust yourself. I know what I'm talking about. It's you that's got the inability to understand this opportunity, which is working with me. I just thought, well, surely I've got a better chance of influencing these leaders and these decision makers if I am on my own in a position of expertise by saying, you've got to hire me to fix this problem and this is what I do. It shouldn't be, but it is easier to do that when you're not in-house. And it's crazy. There's so many in-house people that will be in the position I was, overlooked for their expertise because they're part of a hierarchy. And I've said for a long time that HR... Well, a strategic HR person, head of people, HR director they keep this conversation around having a seat at the table. They shouldn't have a seat at the table. They should be circling it because if you're part of the hierarchy, you can't actually influence the change and have the neutral opinion that you need to have to better the business. Because if you're part of the hierarchy, you answer to somebody and you're already subject to that. A boss saying no or yes or prove yourself and yes, you should still be accountable to KPIs and things, but if your job as HR is to advise the CEO on where they need to go in order to tap the resource of what they need to do to get to tap into the resource of their people whilst being an advocate for the people, you can't do that.
It's a difficult position to be in.
It is really difficult. And I think, like I say, people keep having this conversation about HR need a seat at the table. I'm going, well, first of all, we've not even got everybody a seat at the table yet. So that's the first problem. But even then, the ones that are doing that, they need to understand that they've got to work. They've got to be the CEO's right-hand man, woman, because that's the only way that you're going to really make employee experience the forefront of that growth and make sure that the people strategy is aligned with your business strategy and you're both going towards the same goals. And again, unfortunately, there's still a lot of people in businesses and in those leadership positions that don't understand that is a key to success, really.
But that's a good position for you to be in then, because you're a consultancy and you're outside
exactly.
and you're not in the middle of it all and things. So
again, from my experience, that's why, going into consultancy just felt like the right thing to do because I was bored of not being listened to. Ultimately.
Exactly. And you took the leap in July.
I did.
So really not that long ago at all.
No.
How have you found it?
I've absolutely loved. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was riddled with anxiety for the first I think for the first month, I was like, "What on earth am I doing?" But I think quite quickly, I've built a really good network over the years because I've done so many different things. I really lean into learning from different perspectives and what have you. So I had quite a lot of people to go, am I making the right decision? But people that weren't just in HR, so I thought I got a lot from reaching out to getting different perspectives from different industries. I got quite a lot of encouragement to just stick it out. And I kind of understood what the bumps in the road are going to look like, I suppose. And I think with anything, it takes for you to get validated by a couple of new clients and then that's it. You start to believe in yourself a bit more and it starts to just roll on. And I think ever since then, my confidence has just built and built. And like I say, it's only July, but I've already worked with 4 fantastic clients. Wow. One of them, a really big player in Manchester, well, nationwide. And 2 proposals out at the moment. And I'm speaking at a big event in London on Thursday. So it's
incredible.
It's going really well, yeah. So again, I think that's a lot to do with the strength of my network as well, though.
Yeah. So are you working with clients that you've worked for previously whilst working in-house, or is that completely fresh clients?
One of them is. So my previous employer is now a client because I'm a fractional head of people for them. So that means that I can work 2 days a week, keeping consistency whilst also making sure they've got strategic direction for their employee experience ultimately. And the other clients, there's projects, there's retainer. So the retainer ones, it's small businesses that can't afford an in-house person but need that guide from what do I do now? How do I get this set up? And I think one of the things, particularly smaller businesses, that it's setting up from the foundations and getting those people frameworks in place and processes and paperwork that can be really overlooked until you get too big, and then you start to notice all these holes in your business. So they're using me for that to basically try and set all that up for them. And then, like I say, the most enjoyable part is the project stuff because it's really strategic. It's really a lot of the time it's innovative, and I get to stretch my legs a little bit from the creative side.
That's great.
Yeah.
But what do you think has been the most successful thing to get a client? What are you doing business development wise?
You know what? This Q4 is definitely going to be where I'm focusing on my business development, because in our industry, I don't know if it is everywhere else, people in Q4 are pretty much planning for next year, writing their strategies, the budgets are getting written. So typically signing new deals stops and they go, right, well, if we can, we'll push it into the new year and make it part of next year's strategy. So Q4 for me is why I'm, one of the reasons why I was so keen to get on here and why I'm doing this talk in Thursday. Because again, I just want to try and make sure that every time people are thinking about employee experience, that yellow's at the start of their forefront of the mind. So that's this next quarter is when I'm really going to focus on lead generation and business development. I've also been looking at some tech support I've looked at this thing called Score app, I think it is, where you can send like quizzes, answer this about yourself and it'll tell you what basket you sit in, something like that. So far, it's really been my network that's got me, my clients. Every single one has come through my network so far.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You mentioned before we press record that you want to go through the kind of journey of thought leadership and positioning yourself and your personal brand as the forefront of your consultancy.
Definitely.
What is that looking like for you now? What strategies have you got in place?
I think, ask my business coach and he'll be saying we haven't yet. But I think for me, I'm really trying to home in on what, I'd said right at the start, the problem I'm trying to solve in my industry, but it's the same problem in all industries. I think employee experience in my mind is one of the most untapped, underutilised strategic advantage in a business. And I think too often business owners focus all their efforts on marketing and sales and forget that the people, their employees, have got to deliver that. So as particularly in hospitality, that is a very people-centric business. So I really want to try and shine as much light on the impact HR has, because I think although HR has been around forever, it was a transactional role up until 5, 6, 7 years ago. COVID really changed how that role impacts a business. And I think that was what made people understand, wow, you need a people person who understands employee experience, who understands how to get the most out of a team to drive engagement, drive productivity, understand productivity per hour. All these new metrics start to come out to realise, is this a successful business or not? Or is this a successful team? And I think although a lot of good businesses are talking about that and are adopting those strategies, the majority don't understand it yet. And, it's still a relatively new idea. So I think having been in leadership positions in HR and being underutilised myself, I'm in a position now where I'm like, well, I need to start having this conversation and start highlighting how HR and people roles impact business and how ultimately the employee experience has got to be top of that agenda when you're doing strategy year on year. I think having highly engaged, happy staff, you're going to achieve your growth goals quicker.
Absolutely. So for a lot of our listeners, there will be one-woman businesses, maybe work with a couple of freelancers. But then there's also going to be a lot of people that are starting to think about scaling their business. And obviously when scaling comes in, you need to get people on board because you can't do it all by yourself. I feel like I'm kind of in that position where I'm like, right now I kind of need a little bit of help because things are kind of snowballing. But I have no idea where I would start with getting my first person in, what that job role would even entail, what I need in place. So can you talk to our listeners a little bit about that for people who are in that position? What do they need in place? What things do they need to think about? What strategies do they need to implement?
I think, again, this is purely my opinion, obviously. So Yellow is all orientated around helping businesses achieve their growth goals ultimately. So regardless of what stage of that journey that they're on, we can support. So if we're looking right at the start, I think you've got to have a really clear vision of what that growth looks like in your business. What's your where are you aiming to be in 5 years, and work back. And then I think it's what skills are needed to get you on that journey. So I think everything has to be linked to what your goals are. I think too many people think, oh, well, I need that role because everyone else has got that role, or I need that role because it makes me look bigger or better. And ultimately, it's got to, if it's not going to drive your growth, then it's not worth looking at. Again, I think it's completely dependent on what the business is, depends on what role that is. But I think after that, there's some non-negotiables that I've created as a one-woman band that I've already created a scalable solution for. So, for example, weekly reflections, and I've got a joy jar. So every week I kind of put this thing in of what I've achieved and celebrating, and then I've gone, well, celebrating wins. So I'm like, oh, how do we celebrate wins when we're bigger? And what does that look like when you've got 3 or 4 people? If I want to commit to, I'm really keen to, one of my personal values is fairness, and how do you make the world of work more fair? So I'm trying to partner with charities and things that do just that. So again, how would that look when we're a bigger business? It's not just about me. How do you align people to that value? Is that value important when you're hiring new people? So I think you've got to be really clear about what you're trying to achieve, what makes you, what's your business, and what people can really attach to as well. Because again, if you think about the idea that employee experience is the key here, you want your team to be really engaged and locked into what your business is about, because then they're going to be passionate and then they're going to be driven. And if you can make them intrinsic to the growth and go, this is how you achieve, this is how you contribute, then that's the stuff that's going to keep them there and make sure that you achieve those things. And like I say, that's literally going from 1 to 2 to 3 people. So those tiny things is those decisions is what's going to make the difference, I think, in attracting the right people and making sure you've got the right person to help you get to the next stage, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think from that point, then it comes down to processes and paperwork. As in, like, if you've got the right, if you're looking at a team of 10 plus, you want to make sure that you're managing expectations. What does good look like? What does bad look like? How do you reprimand bad behaviour? How do you celebrate good behaviour? When do you get together? What does your communication cadence look like? There's, like I say, limitless for how we can support businesses in growth. But I think there's opportunity in every size, every stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of retention, what do you think is the main thing that people need to look at to retain staff? Because I know that's a huge thing. And when I worked in corporate, I was operations. So one of my roles was HR, but I had no idea what I was doing and didn't really know what HR entailed at all. But
so
one of
many
my
people
jobs,
end up in HR
honestly,
by accident.
But yeah, so retention was always a really, really big thing. And it obviously costs more to hire a new person than it does to retain staff. So can you give any advice on how to retain staff?
Communication. I think that is the biggest thing, like just listening to your team. And I know it's such an obvious one, but companies just don't do it. They think, and just the smallest thing about having regular check-ins with them, where it's not a sit-down development conversation. It's how are you doing? What's going on at home? Are you stressed? Is there anything we can do to help you? Why are you struggling to achieve and thrive? Or if they're not, what's next for you? What are you after? How do we help support that journey kind of thing,
Yeah.
and just keeping them aligned with how they're contributing to the business as well. I think people really overlook that a lot, even though in some businesses, in hospitality, for example, not everybody's joining that business for a career. They're joining it because they need a bit of cash, but you've got to keep them engaged in order for them to stay. And then it's not going to, and like you say, that leaky tap situation where they're just constantly leaving, and the turnover is so costly for businesses. And the best way to stop that is communication, just asking them, keeping in touch with them, asking how they are, what they need from you. And it's honestly the one thing that people talk about all the time, and ironically don't do enough of.
Yeah,
all the
absolutely. Time. And then I've always heard this kind of saying is you can't always expect your employees to work as hard as you do, be as passionate about the business as you are, because essentially, like you said, sometimes it is just a cash thing. Sometimes they are just in it just because they have to be. But how do you keep them motivated, keep them passionate, get on the same goals as you and work towards this bigger vision that you have?
I think, tried and tested success I've had is around managing expectations. And I think it's about creating structure in your business that shows them what the goal is, because ultimately they've joined. You want a lifestyle, you're a job. Like your business is still a job for them. So regardless of, they're still there for a purpose to achieve. They want to do better. They want to develop. They're interested in what you've got to offer. So I think, people can overlook that sometimes and get so caught up in, the person. But the reality is they are coming to work. They have chosen to work. So there's still, there's still those elements that you've got to be really mindful of. And I think if you focus on giving them really clear expectations, give them structure around how they meet your expectations, and then what's next after that. And then obviously attach some rewards, some recognition, some communication around it. Just that on its own will indirectly provide some development if you haven't got tools to have like a development program or you're showing compassion and care and you're investing in them. You're keeping them engaged by being clear about what's next and how they've, met your expectations or not. And like I say, that alone, I think is just so simple. But that little cycle is what makes people return and makes people feel valued and seen and heard. And I think that's ultimately it's not even a secret sauce. It's just so simple.
It's common sense.
It is, but it's just, I think people can overcomplicate it. And I think especially in my circles, because there's constant strive to do things better and different and innovate. Yeah. You can focus on something so much, you get so buried in it and forget to just go, hang on a minute, let's just scale it back and what is the fundamentals? And I think I say to my clients, you just need to have, what are your non-negotiables that you commit to your people? And that's all that matters. If it's communicating every 2 weeks from a coffee to grab someone off the floor and have a quick chat with them, is it they don't ever work, because of hospitality, right? They don't ever work. They have 2 days off together all the time. They don't work over 8-hour shifts. I don't know. There's things, what are the non-negotiables? Because that creates your culture, that creates the things that people attach to, and that's what will keep, retain and engage.
Yeah,
ultimately.
Absolutely. And then we talk a lot about workplace culture, and it's obviously a huge thing for a lot of people now. People aren't just looking at the salary and what they've got to offer. They're looking at the whole kind of picture of what work life is going to be like. And I've come from working with very small businesses, and those businesses have kind of scaled, and the culture has been lost through that process. So what does scaling business need to look out for, and how do you kind of capture that culture and make sure that it still exists even though there's double the amount of people?
Yes, I think where the businesses that say things like my culture's disappeared as we've grown, it's because they haven't got either tangible values that are easily that can attach behaviour to. And that's ultimately what it is. Like the leadership behaviour for me is what sets your culture. You can have you can have 3 words on the wall. And if your leaders aren't behaving and, aligned, behaviour isn't aligned with those words, they're just words on a wall. They're just never, ever going to catch on. So it's got to be, your values has got to be what your culture is pinned on. Otherwise, they are completely nonsensical. And I think a lot of businesses create values based on aspirational things, what they want the business to look like at some point, and then they don't know how to behave in that way. And normally what happens then is you end up, if you're a scaling business, if you've got isolated teams or remote teams, they aren't connected to that culture or those values because they're not there and seeing it, or not reminded of the words regularly enough. So they end up creating their own little cultures, and then you have this real disconnected, all different variants of culture in the business. So again, I think you've got to be really clear about what are your values, how do we attach behaviour to them, and what does that behaviour look like in the form of, processes, communication, everything that we just spoke about before, really. It's all down to behaviour and leadership behaviour.
Yeah, exactly. Every single person that's in a leadership role has to embody those values 100%, and live by them.
Yeah, and I think that for scaling businesses, that is super important. And again, I think these non-negotiables is it simplifies it. It keeps it really easy to remember and don't forget, these leaders and founders have got so much on their mind to also feel responsible for everybody's culture and keeping everyone aligned. It can be overwhelming. So bring it back, keep it simple. What are your non-negotiables? How do they align with your values? And all together, that becomes a culture. And it's how you then remind everybody else their responsibility to be accountable for that behaviour as well. And ultimately your role as a leader becomes, yes, you're a business manager, but as you get bigger, you're more about what's next and are they doing what they're supposed to be doing to ensure we grow and reach the goals that we've set to reach. It's less about you need to trust them to then manage the people and do the output and what have you. It's about, I think you've got to be really, really tuned into your behaviour in order to protect that culture as you grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on to the final question, I just wanted to check how your coffee is.
Well, I mean, it's nearly empty. It's absolutely delicious.
So is mine.
So good.
So we are drinking... Wait, that is the wrong one. We are drinking Dane Law from Rosalie Hernandez, and it has got notes of red grape, dark chocolate and caramel. And it's by the company Vex Coffee. And they have been very, very kind to give us a discount. So you get 25% off your first box with the code Female Founder. So the information will be in the show notes. But I am very glad that you like this coffee. Cheers. So finally, to finish off, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a brand new business owner?
Ooh. I think you've got to trust yourself. I think... there's so many times I could have talked myself out of doing it. But you've got to trust yourself, really, really, really lean into your network. I think a lot of people overlook the power of connection and community and how much referrals are just a godsend because, with anything in business development, you're more likely to buy off somebody you like, know, trust. Yeah. So if someone else is referring you because you've already built a great connection with them, then half the job's done. It's so hard going into something cold. So I think really lean into your network and trust yourself. Because I think when I was in my panic phase in month 1, I decided that, I'm not going to be successful in hospitality because clearly nobody wants to work with me and this was a really bad idea. So I need to go in different industries. I panicked and went and found a completely different network. Wow. And went to this networking event, and I ended up being sat in front of this guy who was in his 70s. He had this business that was a utility broker, actually. So super exciting. And he was chatting to me. And he said, so what is it you do? So I'd said, it was HR in a nutshell, this is what I'm up to. And he said, well, how are people going to take you seriously? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're young and you're beautiful. I wouldn't take you seriously. Wow. So obviously you're going to come up against people who underestimate you all the time. Yeah. And I think you've got to be really, again, trust yourself, trust what you know, trust what you bring to the table. There's a generation that is still in power at the moment that thankfully are coming on the way out because we absolutely need some fresh leadership mindset for sure, case in point. And I think experiences of every generation is just so valuable. And I think everyone coming into this, you've done it for a reason, you've done it for your purpose. Remind yourself what that is, and really trust yourself, and lean into your network for sure.
Yeah. I love that. Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. And I'll put all of your details in the show notes so everyone can go and find you. Follow you on LinkedIn because you are active.
Very active on LinkedIn. A bit of a gobshite, some say.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Amazing.
That was exciting.
Thank you. That was really good.
Did it make sense?
Yeah,
I didn't want to ramble
really
too
good.
much.
Coffee with a Female Founder is hosted by me, Amy Cole. If you're interested in finding out more about The Female Founder, sign up to the waitlist at www.thefemalefounder.co.uk. The podcast is recorded and produced by QPod Productions in Oldham, Greater Manchester. For more information, visit kupod.co.uk. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you give us a like, share and follow. If you would like to feature as a guest, please email amy@thefemalefounder.co.uk.